right, good morning, pre-AP biology. Today, I want to finish up that note packet that we started the other day on Friday. So if you guys will get that out and just kind of follow along here and just kind of fill this in as I go through this and kind of listen to the lecture as I go. Again, there's some vocabulary terms that you're going to have to be familiar with. So we're going to start off here today with this picture. This is a blue-ringed octopus, one of the deadliest animals in the world. It produces a lot of skin toxins, but it's an aquatic animal and only lives in Australia pretty much. So you don't have to worry about coming in contact with it too much. But again, this is an example of an invertebrate. Invertebrates make up 95% pretty much of all the animals on Earth. So again, a lot of what we talk about in this unit deals with invertebrates. So we're going to talk a little bit about their physiology a little bit today, and kind of compare it to some higher level animals as well. All right, so you know, whenever it comes to physiology, we're kind of looking at structure and function. For example, a spider has lungs. They're not like our lungs, but the function of a spider's lungs is the same as ours. So, the form, how their lungs are made, differs from how our lungs are made, and their structure is different. But as far as the function goes, it's exactly the same. So, we're going to look at a lot of different functions of organisms today, and just kind of understand that really they're not much different from a lot of other animals because again, essentially they have to do the same things. They have to feed, they have to respirate, they have to digest food. They just do it in a little bit of a different way than some other animals do. All right, so let's take a look at function number one, feeding and digesting. Right? All animals, I don't care if it's an ant like you see in the picture here, or if it's a human being, every animal has to digest food. There's typically two types of digestion. One of them is called intracellular, which means that the food is actually digested inside of the cell. Now, there's not very many organisms that do this as far as animals go. Sponges are pretty much the only ones that undergo intracellular digestion. And that's because mainly they don't have any specialized cells that help them digest food. So it all has to be done inside of their cells. Extracellular digestion is where the food gets broken down outside the cells. For example, like in humans, we have a digestive system like a stomach and intestines that breaks our food down for us. And then we have a circulatory system that carries all those nutrients to every single body cell. So, the food doesn't get broken down in our cells, it gets broken down outside of our cells and it gets carried to every individual cell. So, that's called extracellular. Animals that do that typically have what we call a one way digestive tract, which means food goes in one way, goes in the mouth, and then the waste goes out the other end. Okay, so it's a one-way street for our digestion. Some animals have a two-way digestive tract, which means food goes in one opening and the waste comes out the same opening. All right, so one animal that does, I'll show this to you on the next picture, but these are animals that have a one-way tract. For example, an earthworm, food goes in the mouth, it travels through the intestines, and eventually waste comes out the anus, kind of like us, right? In a bird, same thing. Food goes in the mouth, and then waste comes out the anus. Grasshopper, same thing. This is a planarian worm. A planarian worm, kind of interesting. This is the head up here, but the mouth is actually down here. All right, this area is where food comes in, it's also where waste gets excreted. So this is a two-way digestive tract. It's not the same as what it is in us. But I mean, essentially they have to feed and they have to excrete wastes. They just do it a little bit differently from what we do. Respiration. Regardless of the animal, every animal must have oxygen gas and they must get rid of carbon dioxide gas. So that means that these gases have to be exchanged with the environment. Every single respiratory structure typically has two characteristics. One of them is a large surface area. Like, for example, in us, lungs are really big organs. They have a lot of surface area to come in contact with whatever it is that we're trying to pull in. In this case, oxygen gas. Gills in fish, have a lot of surface area to come in contact with the water so that they can pull oxygen gas out. They also have to be moist. All right, that means they have to have like a mucus coating around them. That's really important to help gases come in and out of the actual structure. Some are invertebrates, again, especially ones that live in the water, they use gills. Some invertebrates are actually skin breathers. They actually breathe through their skin. They don't have specialized organs to help them do that. Terrestrial invertebrates, I mean, like humans, we have lungs, obviously. Insects have structures called spiracles. I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. Spiders have something called book lungs. But again, one of the biggest things about this is the book lungs of a spider here. You see it here in this picture down below. It's kind of like a stack of respiratory structures. Like they're kind of stacked like pages of a book. That's why they call them book lungs. But this is what helps a spider breathe. Okay, and that's where they exchange those gases. They bring in oxygen gas and they give off carbon dioxide gas that way. These are spiracles in insects. You'll notice here that there's these structures on the sides of the insect, and this is where they take in oxygen and they give off CO2. So it's a little bit different from other animals, but they have to do that. Circulation. All animals have to have some way to carry nutrients and also oxygen throughout the body. Those are things that the blood does. Some animals don't have any blood at all. Like a sponge, a jellyfish, no blood. They don't have any hearts. So you might think, well, how would they, circulate nutrients around their body? Well, they just simply do it through diffusion. Nutrients just enter the cells through diffusion, and all of their waste just exits through diffusion as well. So they just depend on the water. That's why they're aquatic. They depend on the water to bring nutrients in, and they can excrete waste that way. So it's just simply through diffusion. Again, other animals like more complex invertebrates, they have hearts, they have blood vessels. There's typically two types of circulatory system. One of them is called an open system. The other one is called a closed system. In an open system, for example, let's say this simple picture here. This is the heart. Let's say this is in a, I don't know, let's say this is in some type of a worm, for example. Earthworms have this. Oops, sorry, my PowerPoint got messed up there a little bit. There we go. I'm sorry. Some animals have what we call an open circulatory system. Arthropods and mollusks have this. Here, for example, is the heart, which pumps the blood, and the blood is carried through blood vessels, and it goes to different tissues in the body. The thing about an open system is the blood will actually leave the blood vessels. In a closed system, that doesn't happen. For example, in a human, why this keeps happening? In a human, the blood never really leaves our blood vessels. It stays enclosed. It stays inside, our arteries and veins all the time. So, for example, the blood that leaves the heart, this picture on the right is really good. It'll leave the heart. It'll travel out to the rest of the body. Let's say your kidneys or your liver or wherever, and that blood will drop off all the nutrients, but the blood itself doesn't ever leave the vessels. And then the blood just travels back up to the heart. So a closed system, again, the blood never leaves the blood vessels. It's only the nutrients that are in the blood that leave the vessels. Hopefully that makes some sense to you. Excretion. Excretion is a way that we can get rid of cellular wastes. Now, there's typically two things that need to be gotten rid of from cells. One of them is water. Your cells have water in them, and if there's any excess water, that water has to be removed. Now, in humans, we get rid of our water mainly two ways: one through sweating, the other through urination. Now, another thing that we have to get rid of in our cells is something called ammonia. Ammonia is a product from the breakdown of proteins. When our cells break down proteins or amino acids, we produce ammonia, and that ammonia is actually poisonous. So if our cells don't get rid of it, we'll die. So that's like really, really important. Now, we do have, again, a special organs in our body, our kidneys, that help to filter out that ammonia. And again, we just release that through our urine. So again, every animal has to do this. Some animals like aquatic invertebrates, they just simply do this through diffusion. They don't have any kidneys, to help them remove their waste, so they just release it from their cells directly into the water. Again, in terrestrial invertebrates, like for example, I don't know, like insects and other higher level invertebrates, they have specialized structures that help them do that. In humans, we have kidneys and a bladder, a urinary tract that helps us get rid of our excess waste. Response to stimuli, another function all living things have to do. Invertebrates typically show, several different trends in their nervous system. We call them centralization, cephalization, and specialization. Centralization basically means that in the center of the body, like for example, through the middle of your back and even up through your head, centralization, that means that that's where all your major nerve endings are. Cephalization, we talked about last week, that's like the having a head area. And specialization means that we have specialized organs that help us respond to things in the environment, things like eyes and ears and all that. So, this animal here, this is a very simple invertebrate. This is called a hydra. It's a type of cnidarian. Cnidarians are not centralized. They don't have, I mean, they do have nerves, but they're just kind of scattered throughout their whole body. They're not very centralized. They're not very cephalized. They don't have a head, and they're not specialized. They don't have like special organs like eyes and ears and things like that. So, simple animals don't have these things. A flatworm, this is a planarian worm here. This animal is a little bit more centralized. I mean, you can kind of notice that kind of in the middle of the body here. There starts to see some nerve endings that are starting to form. They're cephalized. You can definitely tell that they have a head area, and they're more specialized. I mean, these guys even have little eyes. These are specialized organs that help them pick up things from their environment. They actually can detect changes in light densities, so they can actually move towards where there's light, which might mean there's food or something there. Arthropods, here's an example of an invertebrate that is very centralized, it's very cephalized, and very specialized. So you get, as you move up, the animal kingdom, you tend to see those trends start to appear. Movement and support. Um, Different animals have different ways to kind of support themselves and kind of move themselves. Some animals have what we call a hydrostatic skeleton. For example, cnidarians and worms have things like this where they do have specialized cells that are kind of like muscles that help them kind of pulsate through water and help them wiggle through water. But they're mainly it's mainly made of water. They actually fill up with water. They can expel it, kind of help themselves move. Exoskeletons. Some animals have a skeleton on the outside of their body, like arthropods, for example. It's actually made of a carbohydrate known as chitin. Endoskeletons. These are inner skeletons, right? They're common in vertebrates. Even echinoderms, like starfish, actually have an endoskeleton on the inside of their bodies. And then finally, the last function is reproduction. I think we kind of understand that all animals need to reproduce. Some animals can reproduce asexually during part of their life cycles, either through binary fission or through a process called budding, which is where like a group of cells will pop off and it will like form a whole new organism. Sponges typically can do that. It's called budding. It's kind of an interesting reproductive structure. But most animals, again, will reproduce sexually, where they'll produce, one will produce sperm, one will produce eggs. Some animals are hermaphroditic. Earthworms, for example, are hermaphrodites. But the males, again, must fertilize the females if there's two different sexes. And that can happen externally, like in fish, like the females will lay the eggs, and then the males will come by and fertilize the eggs outside the body. Internal fertilization, like humans, for example, there's internal fertilization where sperm has to go inside the body to fertilize the egg. Regardless, sexual reproduction happens whether it's external or whether it's internal. All right, guys, that is it for the notes for today. Hopefully, you got those, and please make sure that you fill in those notes. All right, have a good day.